diversity for me is one of those melting pot type concepts of making sure you give people from all walks of life an opportunity to participate and have an actual seat at the table. So to me, I think people always talk about how diversity and inclusion are actually different. I see diversity as kind of like the table stakes, and we'll talk a little bit more later, I think, about the inclusion, and that piece takes a little bit more effort. But diversity is table stakes because, you know, we live in a country that is actually diverse. So from a diversity perspective, to me, it means giving people from all walks of life an actual seat at the table and a voice.
Very good, thank you. Hannah, how do you see that question?
Well, I see diversity as having an opportunity, regardless to what you've been stigmatized, regardless to what people think about you, being given an opportunity to use the vehicle you have to do what you need to do on this God-given earth, not to be discriminated because you're female, not to be discriminated because you're Black, or even not to be discriminated because you're a loudmouth, but to be given an opportunity to be you. I do see diversity as inclusion, because without being included, you have no diversity. You may exist, but nobody really cares a hoot or gives you the opportunity to let them know I'm a lot like you. When I get hurt, I have feelings too. When I get cut, I bleed too. So to me, diversity is having that opportunity to really be respected, to really be valued, and to really be a part of the world that I exist in.
Okay, very good. Okay, Ash, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I agree with all the things Hannah just said. I think that diversity is about bringing people who, through various conditions and circumstances, have been excluded, whose voices have not been considered as valid as, you know, members of the dominant group, bringing them into the conversation. Not just bringing them into the conversation, but making them feel like their contributions are actually as important as anyone else's. And, you know, oftentimes I think that we can stigmatize people for their identity unjustly. So think about, you know, being gay in the 1950s. That fact alone, that one fact about you, meant that everything else about you was suspect, right? That everything else you had to say, everything else you had to offer, all your life experiences were, you know, suspect and inferior. And thankfully we've made progress there. We've also made progress on race, but we have a lot more work to do. And there's still a lot of prejudice in society. There's still a lot of unconscious prejudice, even among people who would like to think of themselves as, you know, relatively enlightened. So it's a conscious process. None of us are perfect. I'm not perfect. I have biases that I have to check too. I think everyone does. And that's a matter of understanding that we grow up in a society that has its systemic biases, and it's unrealistic to expect anyone to resist that as an individual. What we can do is read, talk, watch movies and TV shows from different experiences. In our professional work, we can interact with colleagues and people we serve from different backgrounds. And that's all a process of revising the biases we grew up with, the implicit and explicit prejudices we carry with us. So diversity is the antidote to kind of a poisonous upbringing, let me put it that way.
Mm-hmm. All right. Actually, that kind of dovetails rather nicely into the next question I've got, which I'm going to wrap these up into two questions and into one of which was, the question is asked, have you faced or witnessed prejudice or discrimination throughout your mental health journey? I think that's one of those questions that pretty much everybody sitting here today can give an affirmative yes to that one. But I want to ask you that question and add to that this following question, okay, which is on a personal level, why is diversity, inclusion, and inclusion important to you? So what have you seen on your own to yourself or people around you as far as the discrimination on the mental health journey? And on a personal note, okay, is or why is diversity and inclusion important to you?
Well, I'll begin, I suppose. So some of you know this, but I have a physical disability, and I'm in a wheelchair. So I've been medicalized my whole life. You know, I spent a lot of time in hospitals, and you know, you can often think of yourself, and the doctors can think of you as well. I mean, doctors aren't perfect. Doctors can think of you as just a series of conditions to be modified and, you know, treated and cared for. But they might not think of you as a person who has a will or interests or motivations beyond the clinical setting. So that can be very frustrating. And I think that, you know, that's a microcosm of how lots of people are treated in their mental health experience. It's that they arrive in a setting and the conditions that they talk about are isolated from the larger conditions of society. So for example, you know, if an African-American person, I'm not African-American, obviously, but if an African-American person says they're struggling with anxiety or depression or stress, I think the natural instinct of many mental health professionals might be to try to say, well, have you tried antidepressants? Have you tried talk therapy? Have you tried meditation, mindfulness, etc.? And those all can be valuable, certainly. I'm not saying there can't be, but we can't detach the person who arrives in a clinical setting or a therapist's office from the person who exists in this chaotic, often violent society we live in. And I think that that is a form of prejudice that people can unconsciously absorb. And it's not even necessarily a prejudice that I, you know, fault medical professionals for or, you know, psychologists for, because they are not social scientists. They are not policymakers. But what they can do is be curious. What they can do is think, what would my life have looked like if I had had this person's upbringing, or if I had had this person's, you know, impediments. So that's one way I think mental health and prejudice can intersect, is just a lack of curiosity, a lack of attention paid to things that happen outside the four walls of a clinical setting.
Okay, very good. Mark, how do you feel on those two particular questions? Again, obviously, witnessing prejudice and discrimination throughout the mental health journey being one, but two, why is diversity and inclusion important to you?
I'll start with the mental health piece. My oldest son has schizophrenia. He was diagnosed back in 2012. So upon his initial break, it was led and or assumed by his professionals that just initially that based on his age at the time, he was in his, you know, mid-20s, you know, African-American young man, the doctor, I guess, routinely they have to ask some of these questions, but the assumption was that, you know, my son was a recreational and often used drugs, you know, that it was involved. That he had maybe gotten a hold of some bad marijuana or something of that nature, that he didn't have this, you know, mental illness. So it took us, you know, drug test after drug test, condition after condition, to get to the point of really realizing that, no, this is not a drug-induced situation. This is a mental situation and a mental illness that my son has. And I took a little while for the final diagnosis to come, but the prejudice or the implicit bias that Ashish was mentioning actually went into play with how my son got cared for from a mental health perspective. It was unnecessary. It didn't cost him or us a lot of time, but it was an inconvenience, in my opinion, that was unnecessary and did slow down a little bit of getting to the root cause of what it was that he had. So we see that often. I also think along the lines in this mental health journey, there aren't as many psychiatrists as well as mental health professionals that look like us and have had and understand our lived experience and could have a better identification for how our talk therapy should go and the treatment and the things for which we have to live with on a daily basis, being an African-American man in America. So that's something that I don't think that the mental health profession can do. I'm just hopeful that more people of color become interested in the mental health field and actually start to participate in that process. So that's the mental health journey for me. But personally for me, diversity and inclusion is important because it does give us an opportunity to have that, not only that seat at the table, but that voice that can actually be heard. I believe that diversity and inclusion makes organizations, no matter whether it's NAMI or ABC Plumbing, I don't care what the organization is, it makes you stronger, right? When we have the opportunity to have people come to the table and participate on the team that brings different ideas and perspectives to the table, it gives us that opportunity to make sure that we're coming up with a service delivery that is inclusive of everyone that we are looking to work with, right? I mean, if we build a widget, it would make sure that the widget worked for every type of machine the widget was supposed to work for. So diversity and inclusion is important to me personally because there were opportunities for me that didn't exist. I knocked on the door. Sometimes people didn't come. So if they didn't come, I kicked on the door. So then I tried kicking and knocking on the door, and those things actually did help. I've also found myself being someone who's a champion in that regard. So all the companies I've ever worked at, I've started 3 separate diversity and inclusion councils at companies that I didn't think had enough representation of either people of color or women within the organization, what have you. If the organization wasn't diverse, I made sure that they had an opportunity to put together committees and councils to ensure that they were recruiting and respecting and understanding the value that people from different backgrounds brought to the table. That is something that I've kind of always championed, both professionally and personally, because I believe that it's important that everyone has a voice in the process, no matter what it is. But from the mental health and NAMI perspective, it's definitely something that I have as a relatively new affiliate president tried to make sure that we continue to exercise both at the board level and throughout our organization.
All right, very good. And Hannah, with you, since like Diane, you two were kind of the groundbreakers on community inclusion for NAMI in North Carolina. You know, I know that you've got a lot that you can speak to as far as the mental health journey that you've been on, but also speak to us about the direction that you've been going to with things like community inclusion and diversity within, you know, with both yourself and within the affiliate itself.
Me?
Yeah.
Okay. My memory is not that long, so I don't know if I remember all of that.
Take your time.
But as far as from a mental health point of view, I too have experienced discrimination, and I have forgotten until I was listening to Mark talk about his son's plight. Back in 1994, on May 17, 1994, I shall never forget that day. I had an unusual experience for me, and I knew something traumatic was going on inside of my head. I was here, and I live in Swamp, in the woods, by myself, but I knew that things weren't right. So I tried to get to my daddy, and make a long story short, I got to him and he got me to the hospital. And when I got to the local hospital, I found this out later because I went back and got my records. The first thing they did was test me for every drug possible. And I am not even an alcohol consumer. I've never used any drugs, any alcohol. And then when they couldn't satisfy the diagnosis with that, then they started trying to see, well, what else can be wrong with this Black lady? And they said, she must be suffering from religiosity. And that's because I was quoting scriptures to keep what was going on in my head together. I had to have a tool, and I didn't even realize that then because I'd never experienced such before. But then when they couldn't go with the, okay, it's drugs, it's religiosity. Finally, they told my family I needed to go to the local psych hospital. They involuntarily committed me. I got there. And when I got there, it was a long story and I'm not gonna go into all of that. But the next day, I was back to me. And they didn't understand, but to make a long story short, not only were I having mental challenges, I was having certain physical challenges that even if I was having mental conditions, I should have never been sent to a non-medical hospital. My blood pressure was like about 200 and something over 100 and something. I had a lot going on. And after the long thing of seeing what was going on with me, I had a growth in my head. But all of that was overlooked. And I do feel that some of it was because I was a Black person. And I was coming in like I came in through the emergency room. I think that maybe that I would not have had to struggle as long with the physical part that was going on with me, along with the mental part, if discrimination hadn't been exercised in the very beginning. And why is diversity and inclusion important to me? One reason is because I am a woman of color. Another reason is because I'm the mother of two children of color. And another reason is because I'm a person with lived experience, and I'm also a mother of someone with lived experiences. And it is so important to me because even with the things that did go wrong, so many things did go right for me that I've seen that don't go right for others until I realized, even in the midst of your storm, you were given so much opportunity. So many doors was open for you and for your child that how can you sit back and not realize just how important it is to be included, just how important it is to be valued, and how that value means so much. That gives people purpose, that gives people meaning. So therefore, I can't afford to sit back and not realize how important it is to be diverse, how important it is to be included, and how important it is for people to learn facts and not live their life based on myths.
All right, fantastic, Hannah. Very good. Thank you for that. We've got two questions, one of which, Barbara, I'm going to address yours a little bit later because that goes with something else that we're going to bring up. But the next question is actually directed to Mark, and this is from Andrea from Wake. First, she thanks you for sharing your experiences today. But Mark, she asked the question, did you use any specific tools and or resources to begin the councils you mentioned starting to encourage more inclusion?
Yeah, those were all, work-related opportunities, and I do have a few of those resources. So I'll share my email address later. But usually, when you start those type of organizations, you get 2 or 3 other people within the company, executive leadership, to buy into the need that is something that you know, the organization is going to embrace and actually get behind. So once you get executive leadership and buy-in, you get yourself a budget. So you're going to have some money that's going to be spent, but then you get yourself a core group of people who understand the need for this. And then you guys come together and you walk through whatever your strategic plan is about how you want to move the organization along to be more inclusive, right? To be diverse in its hiring practices, to be inclusive in its approach to its customers, its current employees, things of that nature. So you can kind of devise what it is that will work within your particular organization. Here at NAMI Charlotte, I kind of brought to bear some of those tools to make sure our board, from the perspective of people with lived experiences, people of different backgrounds, were actually invited to participate on the board. And those are the things I've kind of used to kind of help build, you know, the board of directors here in Charlotte. It's taken me a little longer, probably, but like being included, or the inclusion component of diversity and inclusion, that piece requires a little work. So sometimes, you know, things that require a little work, it might not go as fast as you want, but as long as you're intentional in your thought process and in your design, if it takes you a little longer to get what you want, have at it. So to me, it's something that you have to be more truly intentional about in order to make it happen.
All right, very good. This next question to everybody on the panel, it's a little bit more of an open-ended question, but it's getting more towards where we're going as far as dealing with boards of directors and with affiliates in general. And since Mark, since you're already first up here, we'll go with you. Why is diversity within affiliates especially important?
That's a softball question, Rich. I mean, you think about the community that we serve, right? I mean, if the community that we serve includes everyone, it's not like we say, all right, NAMI is only going to help the people who live in, you know, a certain county, right? All right, and those people who live in that certain county can only look a certain way or only have a certain mental health diagnosis, right? That's not who we are. That's not who, you know, what we do. So if the community for which we serve is diverse, to me, the board that's representing that particular affiliate, that state or whatever, it too should be that way, right? Because then you're having the opportunity to have people with, again, those that lived experience, who bring a background and experience from maybe something that's totally outside of the mental health realm. They might not even have a loved one who has a mental health experience. We may need someone on the board who brings some financial acumen that the board needs to operate as a business. Because Rich, to your point, we're all independent organizations. We're our own little franchise in that regard. So you have to make sure that you're inviting people to your board to help fulfill a skill set that's necessary, that will bring a perspective that maybe you didn't even think about, right? And so for me, you know, making sure that the board represents the community that we serve really is only lockstep with our overall value as an organization, our mission. And it's very, very important to ensure that the board members who are out there trying to make sure that our community that we're advocating for, providing education to and support, knows that the board hears them, sees them, and represents them in that light. Because if we're not diverse and we're not bringing that perspective as leaders, it's going to be difficult for us to do what I think to be a proper job in serving our communities.
Well, and it's interesting because it actually flows into another question I have here. And this is one you hear a lot when presidents get together and talk about their boards. And the question was, how do you respond to the comment, we have board members who best fit the job regardless of race or gender? And part of my response to that is, we have a board that reflects our affiliate, but do we necessarily have a board that reflects the community that we live in? So if you look at the Johnston County Board, yeah, it completely reflects my affiliate, you know, the quote unquote dues paying members. Okay. But how do you talk to the board members and the presidents of affiliates where you say, You need to think outside of where you're at now and look at your community as a whole, and how do you start bringing these people in? You know, based on, as you said, not just going by race or gender, but again, looking at specific job skills that are needed on that board of directors.
Right. Right. I think that comes from making sure that you do a thorough assessment of what that need looks like within your particular affiliate. You know, as leaders in your affiliate, you know what holes you actually need to have filled. So if we're looking at it just from a, you know, how many women you have, how many men you have, how many blacks, whites, whatever, those are easy, right? Those are easy things to do. But you also have to, again, look at those components of the organization that you need to actually have someone who brings the background and the skill set and experience that you need at that particular time. So, I mean, for us, case in point, we're currently looking for someone who has a background. We actually have two holes we need to fill right now. So diversity-wise, we're looking for someone with a skill set in marketing and advertising. We also need someone with financial acumen to make sure that our treasury and our books are managed the right way, right? So that's kind of like level one. We know we need those two holes filled as an organization so that we can continue to move forward. Then we're taking an opportunity looking at what does our board look like now from a diversity perspective. So if we get the skill set, then we're looking at those other components and make sure we're still trying to keep the board at a place where representation is still one that includes everyone, our entire community. So as a board, we all get together and talk about where it is we believe we have the need. And then we look at it on a tiered approach around what the skill set is versus then how do we believe, you know, what type of person we want to bring into that role that will help us continue to move down the path of being both diverse and including people from all walks of life and people that have different backgrounds. So that has helped us a lot in our approach. We have a few doctors on the board. We have a fair amount of people with lived experiences on the board. We have, you know, different ethnic groups are on the board. And those are things we look at on both the primary and secondary and tertiary level to make sure we're able to do that. As I said before, it's taken me a little bit longer to fill it out, but for us, it's important. So even if it takes a little longer, we're okay with that.
All right, very good. Hannah, let me ask you a similar question to what I just asked Mark. Looking at your board and looking at your affiliate, okay, when we talk about diversity, how does your board reflect your affiliate as opposed to how does your board reflect that you've got an affiliate that basically covers 3 different counties, and how you make that work, making sure that you have the board membership to, you know, to make everything run not only smoothly, but be able to get out the programs that you need?
Well, Richard, you know, the board is an issue for me because I'm not supposed to be sitting in this seat.
Yes, I
I
know.
already have my retirement party. But I think that our board that we have, I think it sort of represents our community. And I think that part of the reason that it does is because we live in a military town. So we have people coming in and people going out, and I feel like we have race. We've never in my history really had a real race problem. When I first came to NAMI, in the affiliate at Cumberland, there was a pretty good racial mix. But when I went to NAMI, North Carolina's first event, and I think me and Jim, no, the first time Jim weren't there. I think I was one of the very few people of color there. And it does matter. I mean, you say that question about people fitting the jobs, and I'm sure that people in every category that we're looking at, there's someone in those categories that could fit the job. Because as I stood in those meetings, I would look around and wonder, where are all the people like me? I know mental illness doesn't discriminate, but there's no one here like me. So it matters when you're trying to reach a community, but you do not represent the community. It matters how the community accepts you, because I have had this conversation with some people on NAMI, North Carolina, before a few years back. You're pushing diversity, but there's nobody diverse in your office when it comes to race. How can you say you're so into diversity? I'm sure there are qualified people of color, or, so I do think it matters. I understand that point, but I think that it does matter. And I think that, like Mark said, it's a job, but I think that it's a job that we really, really have to realize that we do have to look at that job and embark upon that job, so we can really become diverse, not just as race, not just as gender, and with everything, lived experiences, age, all of that stuff makes a difference. Because when I came to NAMI Cumberland, it was an old affiliate. And when I say old, I mean old. The members were 90 years old, 80 years old, hardly nobody 50 or under. So that's what's been a real challenge for us, is to reach that diversity when it comes to age. And then when we reach them, how do we retain them? Because we're old people trying to reach the people we don't understand their culture at all.
Sure, go ahead.
I asked Richard permission to butt in. I'm not on the agenda, but it's not going to stop me. Regarding the Johnston County Board, I don't think we adequately represent the community. We have some big holes in that area. But when I taught a couple classes for you guys, Hannah, I was impressed with the diversity that you had. And I took that with me to Johnston County in the hopes that someday we would be close to that. But it takes a lot of time. And it depends on what the history of your environment is culturally, which in Johnston County has always been bigotry. And we're working against that. It just will take some time.
All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Ashish, I got an interesting question for you. And yes, I know your boss is on here listening, but don't worry, we got him covered, so you're cool. All right. Since you're not necessarily dealing with an affiliate, but you're dealing more with the state office and to a certain extent the state board. Okay. Diversity within the state organization, how do you see that as making it more representative?
I think, the fact that we live in a huge state kind of alters our incentives. Like if we lived in Vermont, if we lived in Rhode Island, or even if we lived in a geographically big state, but a sparsely populated one like Montana or Wyoming, I think that our incentives would be different. But we all know North Carolina is hugely diverse, from Manteo to Murphy, geographically, racially, socioeconomically. And there's so many things about the experiences that people have had, as Hannah and Mark were saying, that are incomprehensible if you spend your entire life, as many people do, just between Raleigh, Greensboro, and Charlotte. Because I grew up in Greensboro, and it wasn't until I went to a summer program when I was 17 at Salem College called Governor's School, and I met people from other parts of North Carolina, other teenagers, that I realized, there were people who grew up in towns with a Walmart and 2 stoplights, and those were the landmarks, right? There were very capable people who went to high schools where they weren't allowed to take their textbooks home at the end of the day. And coming from a relatively good high school in the third biggest city in North Carolina. That was really hard for me to wrap my head around. And even now, I mean, there's so many people in the state who, like I said, especially in the middle of the Piedmont, who don't really understand what it's like to live in eastern parts of the state, who don't know about the history of North Carolina outside of, Raleigh, Chapel Hill, Charlotte, Durham, Greensboro. So everyone knows about the Woolworth sit-ins from 1960, hopefully. But how many people know about the 1898 Wilmington coup, right? Like, I didn't learn that in high school. That's something I learned as an adult because other people from outside North Carolina, in fact, were talking about it in terms of the history of American racism. So diversity for NAMI, statewide, I think should mean hearing contributions of what has made people the way they are, which is like the most fascinating question there is, right? How did you become who you are? And that is real diversity to me, not just recruiting people who look different from you, but may also be of the same socioeconomic status and have the same culture and talk just like you and watch the same TV shows you do, but people who have literally, not had opportunities you've had, people who have seen the world differently, who have noticed things you haven't noticed because they have had their lives circumscribed in some way or have been limited in some way, but have at the same time, in other ways, been expanded in terms of what they can see and what they can notice. So diversity should not just be cosmetic, diversity should be substantive. And I would draw that distinction there. I think, everyone in our office at Millbrook, I think would agree with that. And I think that that's one of the things I really enjoy about working at our state headquarters is that there's a real openness to that idea that diversity means more than just checking off boxes. It means digging deeper and finding out what the truth is, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it demands that you change as an individual and as an institution.
All right, very good, thank you. All right, we're going to come up into the last question because we're already up at 10:51. And actually, we have 3 questions, but I think we can actually very well roll into one question. And it's going to be open to all of you. The first question is, or the first question that was asked is, what are some of the creative ways to actively source board members and members from unrepresented communities? But Barbara also asked the question, where can an affiliate find racial equality training for its leaders, or could affiliates join together for that training? And then we have John Week's question is, can someone speak to the issue of finding people? Oh, that just disappeared. Where did it go there? Can somebody speak to the issue of finding people with a willingness to serve on the NAMI affiliate boards? I find apathy actually creeping in to some extent. So I think this all rolls into one big question, which is, what do as presidents and board members to get people outside of the little box that we all work in? Okay, how can we be creative? What kind of things can we do? And would it be a good idea as presidents and board members to set up some sort of training to give people on the boards and the presidents the ability to look at all these different scenarios so that we can bring a more representative membership into the affiliate and then eventually onto the board? And I'm going to start with Mark on that one.
Okay, I think that I'm gonna start backwards, Rich. I think the training is definitely needed. And I think it's a great idea that the affiliates get together on what that looks like. I'm not sure there's an actual playbook though, guys. I really don't. If it exists, if there's a book that exists, I hadn't read it. So I think we just have to be, mindful of what it is that we're looking for and how we do that. But I do have just some initial suggestions as to how you can make sure that your board is representative. You start with your own core network of who your board members are today. You guys have those candid, honest conversations about what it is you believe you need. Have your own board members begin to reach out to their individual networks, telling people how great NAMI is and why they should be willing to join the board. You can also partner with some of your provider community, you know, the counselors in the community, psychiatrists in the community that you're sending people to, folks within the peer group, within your peer leadership council groups. You have to make sure that everyone that you touch that's associated with your affiliate knows and understands the goal of your affiliate being not only diverse, but inclusive. And that way, everybody knows that they should be talking with people who are like-minded in that regard. So you can partner with, again, people that were in your core network and then beyond. And one of the other things that we've begun to do, as a board is when people come on and they're going off, we give those people the goal and the task of making sure they find their replacement. And since that person has kind of been indoctrinated into what we're looking for and understand the type of person we want, then hopefully the person they bring isn't someone that doesn't fit that mold as well. So, current board members are responsible, before they step off, are responsible for finding their replacement. And their job is to make sure that they're looking for people who also meet and understand the goal and vision of our affiliate. But people out there exist. You can have community events once, COVID's lifted. When you have conversations with people about what we do, make sure you take the opportunity to ask people what they do. Because when you do that, you may be finding the very next board member who could fit a void or a hole for which you have. And also, volunteers are low-hanging fruit. People who volunteer at your organization already today, they understand who NAMI is, what we do, and how we do it. And so tap into some of those folks and see if they're willing to elevate their volunteer status and either become a committee member or committee chair. And then from the committee member, committee chair, then ultimately you're actually, it's kind of like you are training those people to actually become board members. They come into the organization as a member, then they elevate to a volunteer, then a committee member, and maybe a committee chair, and then they can become a board member. So you're, all along making sure those people are indoctrinated to the organization, but also to your overall culture. That's a great way to start in being able to make sure you're identifying board members that will work and fit the diversity and inclusion culture that you're looking for your affiliate.
Yes, and to follow up on that point, I learned not too long after I stepped in and became president, making somebody a member of the board right from the get-go was problematic because it really didn't mean anything to them. But I started taking people and starting them off as committee assignments, and as they slowly work themselves up, so that by the time they get to the board of directors, being on that position has a lot more meaning. Okay, thank you. Hannah, you and I pretty much have the same problem with our board, since, like I was joking the other day, we'll be coming up to the 3rd annual Hannah Carroll retirement party. Regardless of what Peg and Gary said, we got elected presidents, not popes. So we're not planning on being this for the rest of our lives. So how do you look to see about going out and looking for more people to come onto your board?
That's a hard one for me. And I think how I really will have to accomplish this is by looking myself, but looking at the people that I do have on the board that are doing a good job to join in and feel and see this need and help me. Because I don't think within myself, I'm really at a point, or it's really possible for me to do it by myself. I need a team, and especially here, because people get complacent. If you're in a position, and I'm sure that Marilyn can vouch for this, if you're in a position doing something long enough, and people think you're doing it well enough, then they figure, why do we need a new president? And then if you happen to find somebody that's willing, and God forbid they have a legitimate reason not to step into that role, you feel the urgency to move, but yet you feel the responsibility to not move prematurely, but they don't see it. They're like, she's doing okay, and I don't want to go there because I sure don't want the number of hours a day she has associated with that. So just let her stay there. So that's a question I'm not sure if I'm in a position to really answer. But if someone gets the answer, I surely would like to have a team that would to really work on that. Because like Richard said, I am coming up to the 3rd anniversary of that party, and I'm still sitting here after I shouted at the party because I was leaving.
Yeah. Well, we have an example. Ruth Bader Ginsburg showed us what happens when you get in a position and you do really well. She had a life sentence.
I don't think any of us signed up for a life sentence, however, but but you are absolutely right. And it does come to the fact that if you talk to some of the presidents who've been doing this for a long time, it's you get to that position where, you know, you don't want to see your affiliate fail. And I'm not sure that on its own isn't some sort of, I don't want to say a mental illness, but maybe a
Curse.
or something. But yeah, that's what we hopefully all, will do better. But I want to follow up one thing quick on Barbara and something that Mark said. I think the discussion about having training for the presidents and the boards, I think something would be a really good idea to bring up at the next CAP meeting and see somewhere down the road where we cannot put something together so that if an affiliate says, we would like to have somebody come in and train us how to do this, we can put together the people to do this. And certainly there's enough people in the state and enough people in these other affiliates that's got to be possible. Okay, Diane, you can take over from here.
Okay, I just want to say thank you very much, Mark, Hannah, Asha. We really appreciate you participating as panelists. I mean, your expertise and everything like that. And I'm with you, Hannah. We need one big retirement party. Absolutely right. So thank you all. And I hope that you stick around for the rest of the CAP Leadership Retreat.